The accusation didn't arrive as a shout. It arrived as a suggestion dressed up as concern. "We might need to bring in social services," my sister said to the physician, just loud enough for me to hear. "For a competency check before she's anywhere near Mom's paperwork." The air in Northside Memorial's family conference room tasted like metal and disinfectant. A wall clock ticked above a bulletin board of laminated safety posters. The HVAC hummed like a far-off engine. I kept my hands on the vinyl armrests and pressed until the chair squeaked, the sound barely covering the heat rising behind my sternum. Across the table, my brother-in-law did that sympathetic lean people do when they've already decided what's true. "It's better for everyone," he added, eyes skipping over me, as if I were a spill that needed mopping. "You learn around murderers and extortionists that silence can be a fortress." 20 years of courtrooms had taught me to hold the line with nothing but breath. Here, in a bland room with a carafe of burnt coffee and a stack of unsigned consent forms, my fortress felt thin. "I'm Dr. Ree, the cardiothoracic surgeon," said, shifting his gaze between us, as if he'd walked into an argument halfway through. "Your mother needs a complex valve procedure. High risk, but not impossible. We should decide," my sister cut in, folding her arms. "I've been here. I've handled the bills, the appointments, the complications." She flicked a glance at me and let it linger on my jacket and shoes, the careful, unremarkable choices that make people forget you a beat after you pass. "Frankly, doctor, I don't know where she's been living or how she's managing. Look at her. My name is Mara Ellison, 40 years old, senior prosecutor for the state. The plain charcoal suit that my sister found so indictable cost more than her quarterly HOA dues. I wear suits that no one remembers. I wear faces no one follows. It's hard to do your job dismantling organized crime if bus drivers memorize your scarf. The last time I was home, my mother's hair was still mostly brown, and my sister still wrote long captions under her perfect sunlit photos. Then the Marino verdict years ago lit a fuse under people who preferred vengeance over appeals. After that came the Silas Syndicate, and then the Oporto Consortium names that read like headlines and left bruises on anyone who made them. I learned to be absence. For 20 years, absence kept people I loved uninteresting to men who make messages out of families. Northside called me 2 days ago. A fall in the garden. A murmur missed for too long, an ambulance that did what ambulances do. I waited because waiting has kept people alive. Then I booked a flight under a name that has existed just long enough to pass through TSA without friction. In the rental car, I rehearsed what I might say to my mother if visiting turned out to be safe at last. I rehearsed nothing for my sister. "Ms. Ellison, Dr. Ree said carefully, "Your mother designated you years ago as her medical proxy." He slid the paper across the table. "But given the family dynamics, I want to confirm we're all confident in the decision-making process." Elise laughed without humor. "We know what's best. My concern is that Mara, well, she looks like someone who hasn't had a stable address in a while." Mark, her husband, nodded. "There's a fragility. It might not be the right time for her to shoulder this." I had spent the morning in a windowless debriefing room 3 states away, looking at surveillance logs from a case with a body count, then boarded a plane with nothing but a folio, a charger, and the habit of sitting where I can see the exits. Fragile wasn't the word. "I'm fine to make decisions," I said. "I understand the risks. We'll approve whatever gives her the strongest odds." Elise's lip did what it always did when she felt injured on principle. "We haven't heard from you in nearly 2 decades. You reappear looking." She waved a hand over me. "Like life has been doing the driving, and you think you can just sign and vanish again?" Vanishing had preserved her morning runs, the blue glass vases in her kitchen, the habit of not checking the rearview mirror. But that's not a thing you say aloud if you plan to keep peace in the room. I worked my molars together until I could taste the copper of restraint. When you're cross-examining a witness who's memorized lies, you never let them see your questions coming. You let them bump into the truth because they walk there under their own power. With family, there's no such craft. Family doesn't merely misunderstand, it annotates. "I don't want to be unkind," Mark said, which always announces the opposite. "But the clothes, the tiredness. Mara, you look like you need help. Can you even tell us where you've been staying?" "I can," I said. "Then tell us," Elise demanded. "Because the last rumor was you were in some kind of program, addictions or something else." She let Elle stretch just enough to fit whatever she wanted. I looked at the table, the coffee ring, the fostered family of pens, the stack of HIPAA forms with their comforting checkboxes. I could tell her about the years with no fixed address that weren't homelessness but strategy. I could tell her about names I wore like raincoats, papers I signed with hands that never shook in public. I could tell her I had spent 2 winters across town under her nose and never once walked past the bakery we used to love because a camera faced that block and the man who bought it used to work for a man who preferred knives to lawyers. Instead, I said, "I'm here. That's enough for now." Elise's mouth thinned. "It's not enough for Mom. I suspect," Dr. Reese said gently, "it will matter to her that you are present." He tapped the file. "Surgery is indicated. Complications are likely. The longer we wait, the narrower our options." Elise leaned toward him, palms flat on the table. "Doctor, if she's unstable emotionally, legally, whatever it is, we need to protect Mom. There are procedures for this. Emergency petitions, temporary guardianship." My hands stilled. Not rage, just that peculiar stillness that arrives when someone points a familiar weapon at you in a new room. "I'm not unstable," I said, "and the proxy stands." "Proxies can be challenged," Mark said. He smiled without warmth. I Googled. "Then you'll know challenges require more than vibes," I replied. He flushed, but Elise's certainty didn't move. She looked at me like she was mapping the years she hadn't seen, and every unlit square was proof. "You disappeared," she said flatly. "Mom cried herself to sleep. I handled everything. And you come back in a discount suit." I almost laughed. The suit was Italian and restrained on purpose. It had walked into rooms I cannot name, and walked out again without a single face remembering its seam. "What's your employment these days?" Mark asked. "Because whenever we ask you dodge." If there was something to be proud of, there is, I said, and left it there not as a boast but as a barricade. 20 years is a long time to practice being ordinary. You learn to paste on fatigue and let it read as carelessness. You let your hair be hair, not a calling card. You let decay do public relations for you. People see what they expect to see, and most of them expect to see a mess. "Let's keep this to your mother," Dr. Reese said, a man trying to set a cup down without spilling in a moving car. "The decision window is hours, not days." Elise folded her hands as if for prayer. "Then we decide without her," she said, chin lifting toward me. "Doctor, we can file an emergency request within the hour. My friend's attorney handles these. There are 1,000 ways to lose composure. One is to shout. Another is to weep. The one that ruins cases is the one where you show your enemy you've located their throat." I swallowed once and found the familiar lever that drops a wall between blood and speech. "If you move to contest the proxy," I said, "you'll delay the surgery she needs. That delay will be on record." "Threats now?" Mark asked, incredulous. "Facts," I said. The clock ticked. The HVAC hummed. Somewhere beyond the door, a monitor chimed its brittle lullaby. "I don't want to fight," Elise said, voice dropping into the register that makes strangers pity her. "I want Mom safe, and I'm not convinced you can deliver that." The words fell into the space between us and nested there. I took a breath to answer, and the phone in my handbag vibrated. Not the everyday phone that one holds dentist reminders and airline confirmations. The other phone. The one that doesn't ring unless something matters in a way most people never have to imagine. I stood. "Excuse me," I said, and reached for the door. The corridor outside the conference room was the color of old paper. A vending machine muttered to itself beside a corkboard listing grief groups and flu-shot hours. I let the door ease shut, walked far enough that the voices inside thinned to a wash, and answered the phone that mattered. "Ellison," I said. "Mara, it's Cal." Calm voice clipped edges. "Calvin Hart, my deputy." Behind him, I could hear the low domestic of the office, a copier, cycling. Someone laughing too loudly at a joke they didn't understand. "We've got movement on DeMarco." My spine did what it always does when a case with a name attaches itself to a verb. "Go." Defense filed an emergency supplement alleging discovery misconduct and coercive tactics during the June proffer. They're pushing for suppression, and they specifically named you. Judge Hale wants chambers in person within 2 hours. The fluorescent lights hummed. I watched my reflection in a smudged window. Not dangerous, not fragile, just a woman who knew where every exit in a building lived. "I'll make it." "There's more," Cal said. Paper rustled. Call from the Attorney General's office came through 10 minutes ago. Their recommendation for the Eastern Federal District post is official. Letters on your desk. I let the words land without ceremony. It is a bad habit in my line of work to celebrate in hallways. Acknowledged. An Agent Desai's team just finished the harbor seizures. He continued warming now that he had a list. 14 in custody off the wire package you approved. They want to brief joint charges by end of day. The carpet under my shoes was designed to look like stone and feel like compromise. Any risk of spillover, minimal, Cal said. But Hale's clerk sounded jumpy. Defense counsel is signaling a narrative about you that you're never present, that you delegate questionable tactics. It's theater. But the judge asked for you by name. Then he'll have me, I said. Text me the chamber's time and the filings. Sending now, he replied, a beat softer. You okay? It was such an ordinary question in a weird world that it almost disarmed me. I'm at Northside. My mother's surgery window is hours, not days. Families, energetic. Need a body? Cal asked, only half joking. I need 10 minutes, I said. Then a clear lane to the courthouse. You'll have it, he said. I'll prep the points. Bring the book. I ended the call. Exhaled once and let the air leave my lungs slow enough to trick my heart into listening. On my other phone, the screen bloomed with Cal's texts, PDFs, stacking like playing cards a calendar ping. Marking Judge Hale's chambers a note from AG's office with a scanned signature. I slid the device back into the concealed pocket sewn into my blazer years ago and crossed back to the door. Inside, the room had rearranged itself without moving. Elise was at the head of the table now, flanked by Mark's earnest frown and Dr. Ree's tempered professionalism. A nurse had come and gone, leaving behind a new scent of lemon sanitizer. They all looked up as I entered. There is a second in every contested space when the person who left comes back, and everyone decides whether the room will permit their return. It passed. I sat. We've been speaking with Dr. Ree, Elise announced as if she'd convened a panel. Given everything he agrees, it's best if we... I didn't say that Dr. Ree inserted gently. I said any decision should be made promptly and with clarity. Elise's smile was the tight kind she uses on salespeople and waiters, which is what I'm trying to secure. Mara, this is not personal. I don't think you can carry this right now. Mark folded his hands on the table as if to bless the proceeding. There are legal mechanisms, he offered, for temporary transfers of authority in urgent circumstances. We don't want conflict. We want order. You want control, I said, because accuracy still has standing in this world. The proxy stands, Mara Elise said. With the patience she reserves for people who fail to attend her needs, you look lost. You vanish for half a lifetime and appear like a cautionary tale. You can't expect to sign forms and evaporate. Mom needs someone present. I'm present, I said. You've been absent, she countered. Those are different verbs. Ms. Ellison. Dr. Ree said, careful, steady. Your mother executed this proxy years ago. It is valid. But if this becomes a legal contest, it could delay the timeline I would otherwise recommend. He was signaling in doctor language that delay meant risk. I nodded. No contest, I said. We approve the surgery. Elise lifted her chin. You don't get to dictate that. I'm not dictating, I replied. I'm exercising authority your mother gave me. Mark cleared his throat. You keep invoking authority as if saying it makes it real. The conference room door opened before I could answer. A woman in a dark suit stepped in with purpose, checked the faces, and locked onto mine. Efficient hair, flat shoes designed for speed, the alertness of someone who has spent time in rooms where the floor can change. She carried a slim leather portfolio and a phone that chirped once for attention. Apologies, she said to the room at large. Assistant District Attorney, ROWAN County Prosecutor's Office. I'm looking for District Attorney Ellison. The quiet that followed had a texture. Elise's eyes slid to me and back twice as if refusing to land. Mark's mouth parted in preparation to say something that wouldn't help him. Dr. Ree's eyebrows rose a fraction. That's me, I said. Rowan. Judge Hale moved chambers up. Rowan reported efficient as an elevator. Defense counsel is already there. Chambers in 40. Also. She glanced around, read the scene, and lowered her voice without becoming conspiratorial. The AG's letter hit the wire. Congratulations. An Agent Desai asked me to pass on that harbor raids yielded 14 more cuffs off the intercepts you authorized. She'll coordinate with your office after chambers. Elise blinked, And for once, there was no script behind it. District Attorney Rowan, who had not been invited into the family play, gave her a polite half-smile. Yes. District Attorney Ellison. Mark tried to recalibrate. It looked like a man switching lanes without checking mirrors. I thought. He gestured vaguely at me. Is that new? Motions to strike inadequately formed questions are generally sustained, but life isn't a courtroom. I let it sit. Rowan glanced at Dr. Ree. I'm sorry to interrupt medical decisions. We'll be as quick as we can. Not at all, he said. Studying me now with the mild curiosity of a man who had just discovered his patient's daughter wasn't who he'd been told. This may actually clarify a few matters. It doesn't clarify anything Elise said, finding her footing on the only rock she trusted, indignation. A title doesn't make you stable. Doctor, we still have concerns about her capacity. Rowan's gaze shifted. She had the good instinct to let her face go neutral. I can wait in the hall, she said to me. Chambers is firm, but you've got a slice. Thank you, I said. She nodded once and withdrew, leaving the door half closed. The room's temperature hadn't changed, but something had turned. Elise seemed to hear it too. Suspicion looked suddenly like an outfit she'd put on without checking the mirror. Why didn't you tell us, she asked, the fury under her words cooling as it hit confusion. Why would you? How could you keep? Please, Dr. Ree interjected, gentle as an anesthetic. Let's prioritize your mother. Elise rounded on him, then stopped herself, smoothing her features into something called reasonable. Doctor, our point is that if she has issues, if she's not living a stable life, stability is being redefined in real time, Mark said, trying to help and only making it worse. We just want the court to confirm she's fit. The court has been confirming that for every day I've held this office, I said quietly. But if you want a judge involved, we can oblige. He's down the street. It wasn't bravado, and it wasn't a dare. It was a sentence that sat in the room and asked to be acknowledged. Dr. Rehe folded his hands on the file. Ms. Ellison, do you understand the procedure I'm proposing and its risks? I do, I said. And you consent on your mother's behalf? I do, I repeated. He nodded once, made a note in a precise hand. Very well. I'll alert the surgical team. We'll need signatures. He slid the forms closer to me. Elise stared at the papers as if they were stage directions written in a language she didn't speak. This is absurd, she said, but her voice had lost altitude. The door opened again with a soft, courtly knock Rowan hadn't bothered to perform. This time it was a nurse apologetic smile badge sliding on its clip. Ms. Ellison, your mother asked for an update. She's awake. She wanted me to tell you she'd like the garden channel on the TV and that she trusts you to make the call. Elise's throat worked. Mark stared at the wall clock as if it could reassure him by doing what clocks do, keep moving. Thank you, I said. The nurse left. I signed where the flags told me to sign. My pen wrote my name the way it always does, like someone trained it to outrun doubt. Elise found a last foothold. You can't just after all these years cut us out, she said. We kept this house upright. We were here. You think you can walk in with whatever story you've been living and claim the right to decide if our mother wakes up at all? If you have any doubt about my stake in whether she wakes up, I said you've misunderstood something that mattered. Mark opened his hands. Then explain it. Explain everything. His tone already expected refusal. I looked at him, then at Elise, then at Dr. Ree, who watched me with the even gaze of someone used to people making irreversible choices in rooms lined with formica. My office asked me to appear in chambers in 40 minutes, I said. The defense has constructed a story about me to distract from the story about their client. I will go correct that for them. In the meantime, the hospital will prep our mother for surgery. I placed the signed forms where Dr. Ree's hand could reach them. She gets a private room afterward, and whatever security the hospital can accommodate. Elise recoiled at the word as if it had teeth. Security for what? Because you make drama follow you around. The ugly part about truth is that it looks like arrogance to the people who prefer lies. I looked at Dr. Ree instead. I'll cover costs, coordinate with the hospital's legal. If you need a liaison, use my office manager. Dr. Ree inclined his head. I'll arrange what we can. Elise pushed back from the table chair legs, whispering against linoleum. You don't get to turn Mom's recovery into one of your operations, she said. You don't get to brand this family with whatever you've become. Enough, Mark said, not to me, but to her, low and surprising. He wasn't brave. He was tired. Enough. She stared at him as if he'd said a word no one had taught her. The posture she wore, competence, certainty, offense, looked briefly oversized. The door eased open a third time, and Rowan reappeared, one foot still in the hall. Professional apology on her face. "I'm sorry. Judge's clerk moved chambers to 30, she said. "Traffic is what it is." "I'll go," I said, rising. Rowan nodded, then checked her phone. "Also, AG's office asked me to pass along congratulations formally, not just on the wire." The governor's chief counsel called Hart directly. She looked at Elise, then not unkind. "Your sister's workload explains a lot." Elise's mouth formed a shape that might once have been O. It didn't arrive. Dr. Rowan said, "We'll keep this brief." Dr. Ree stood too reflexively, as if a teacher had entered. "Best of luck," he said, and meant it neutrally, as surgeons do luck as a number and a margin. My phone pulsed in my palm before I'd taken a step. The vibration had a weight, a pattern you learn like a colleague's gait. I lifted it. A banner from a secure channel slid across the lock screen, crisp as a verdict letterhead. DeMarco et al. Jury verdict counts 1-7 guilty. Remand ordered. Sentencing life guidelines. For a second, the noon light coming through the narrow window looked like an index card slid under a door. I did not smile. I didn't move. Air went out, came in. Across the table, Elise watched me. Watching the screen, and something unarticulated shifted behind her eyes, like furniture in a house you thought you knew. I lowered the phone, placed it face down on the table next to the signed consent forms, and looked at Dr. Ree. "Proceed," I said. Dr. Ree nodded, once the decision settling into his shoulders. He gathered the consent pages and slid them into the chart with the neatness of someone who has built a life around reducing variables. "We'll page the OR," he said. "Pre-op in 15. A nurse will return for a medication reconciliation and transport." He glanced at Elise and Mark. "You can wait in the family lounge on 3. Someone will come update you before we wheel her back." He left with the files, the door whispering shut behind him. The room held the shape of his absence for a moment. Pen smell, citrus disinfectant, the mechanical hush of the HVAC. Elise stared at the place where the consent forms had been, as if they might reappear and allow a different version of the afternoon to organize itself around them. Mark looked at me in a way that was less combative than confused, as if his eyes were trying to change their prescription mid-scene. "What just happened?" Elise said. Not to me, not to Mark, but to the stubborn thing in the center of the table that refused to be rearranged. "The surgery will move forward," I said. "That part," she snapped, heat sparking through the thin control. "The other part." She groped for a word big enough. "Rowan." "The judge." She gestured toward the phone I had set face down. "Whatever that was." "A verdict," I said, "on a case with my name on it." Mark let out a breath. "So you, actually..." "Yes," I said. Silence sat down with us, heavy, but not hostile. I opened my blazer and took out the leather wallet I use when identification must be indisputable. It isn't the badge that persuades people. It's the way your hand knows where to find it without looking. I set it on the table and flipped it open to the shield and the card with my photo, my title, the signatures that make an office legal. Elise leaned forward, as if she were looking at a photograph of a stranger whose face bore a troubling resemblance to someone she loved. "I don't understand," she said softer now, and not because she wanted to be gentle. "If this is your life, why did you disappear? Why would you let us think?" The rest of the sentence collapsed into air. "Because thinking anything else would have been worse," I said. She frowned, not in disagreement, but in the way skepticism wears when it has been asked to hold a door open for fact. Worse, how? I closed the wallet and slid it back into the inner pocket. It returned to its place like a habit. After the Marino verdict, I said a man in a good suit waited outside the courthouse in a car with plates that belonged to an entirely different car. He didn't look at me. He looked at the people who walked out near me. There was a summary on a forum an hour later, my route, my gate, the pictures someone took from across the street, then a list of addresses associated with my last name. None of those addresses belonged to me. One belonged to you. Elise went very still, the way animals in tall grass go still when they decide their heartbeat is too loud. We traced the post. I continued. The account belonged to a boy whose sister dated a man who owed someone else a favor. That someone else ran errands for a person I had just put in a cage. The first time you see the line drawn between your life and someone else's casual terror, you think this is an aberration. The second time you start counting. After the third, you move the people you love as far from the line as you can and make yourself too boring to be worth tracing. Mark swallowed. You could have told us. I could not, I said, and the iron in that came from a place in me that had been tempered for years. Because telling you turns you into keepers of a secret. Secrets change how people move. They look up when they shouldn't. They pause at doors. Cameras notice pauses. Men who do surveillance for a living learned to read breath on glass 2 decades ago. Elise's gaze dropped to my hands. But 20 years, she said. 20 years. Absence is not a mood, I said. It's a protocol. She flinched as if she touched a wire. I reached into the folio I'd carried in under the blandness of a travel day and took out a photograph I keep, not because I need it, but because it has become a ritual, the thing I place between myself and accusation when accusation carries our family name. Law school graduation, my hair pulled back. My mother's laugh, caught mid-sound, the gown's zipper puckered with the cheap stitching the rental company always used. On the back, a line in my mother's careful cursive, my daughter, my argument, my calm. Elise reached for it and then didn't. She wrote that she said as if confirming the pen had touched paper under the same roof as our childhood. She wrote more, I said. I unfolded a page with creases softened by handling. A copy, not the original. The original lives in a safe, in a building whose cameras I tested before I ever signed the rental. The letter is short directions for a post office box at Decker Station, a code that changes every season the name of a clerk who would rotate out after a year because no clerk should learn a person's resurrections by habit. If you need to reach me, you will. If I can answer, I will. If not, it is because answering would make you visible. I love you as privately as safety permits. Her signature was the same one she used on field trip permission slips and birthday checks. Elise's hand came to her mouth. Not melodrama, not theater. Mark read the line about visibility and looked as if a set of museum lights had just come on inside a painting he'd walked past for years not seeing. I met her 3 times after Marino. I said, not here. Portland, once Omaha once, and Interlaken of all places, because a woman from her book group had a son stationed there, and no one from our county goes to Switzerland without telling stories about it for 10 years. We chose places where stories about us would look like postcards, not evidence. We bought coffee with cash and used names that sounded like typos. Elise closed her eyes. She never said. She couldn't, I said. Silence is not a lie. It's a barricade you build when the storm you're in isn't weather. I paused. She kept a folder. Clippings with my name blacked out, case synopses with dates and docket numbers. She liked the tidy look of a case number the way it refuses gossip. Did she know you'd be here? Elise asked. She knew I would come when I could, I said. That was the agreement we made the last time we met 3 summers ago at a rest stop in the middle of a flat place where you can see a car coming for miles, and the wind makes conversation look like a foreign language. We sat on a concrete bench and ate vending machine peanuts because there are rituals you invent when you run out of holidays. Elise held the photograph now. Her thumb rested on the edge of our mother's sleeve. Her voice came smaller. I thought you didn't call because you didn't care. I didn't call because I cared enough to break my own heart, I said, and immediately wished I hadn't put it that way, because the sentence felt too clean for a life that hasn't been. We sat with that. Mark rubbed his eyes the way men do when they discover their competence doesn't apply. The security, he said after a moment. Why? Because verdicts make noise, I said. Noise attracts interest, not always from the people you think, sometimes from the ones who want to be seen standing near the noise. Hospitals are soft environments. Too many doors. Too many uniforms that look like each other. If someone shows up with a story and a laminated card they printed at home, a tired person at a desk might wave them through. I looked at him. Tired people at desks are why I learned to ask for lock codes instead of names. Mark nodded slowly, grateful for the refuge of logistics. The door opened, and the same nurse badge reading S.G. Mill stepped in with a laminated smile that did not cancel out its kindness. Pre-op is ready, she said. We'll take Mrs. Ellison down shortly. She asked if you could bring the scarf from her bag. The blue one. She said it makes the room less grim. Elise's face tilted toward the nurse as if toward heat. "We can bring it," she said quickly, almost pleading. "We can." She stopped herself, glancing at me. "Bring it," I said. "Please." I looked at Jamil. "She trusts the plan. She said to tell you, go with the numbers," the nurse said as if relaying a code phrase. "She said you'd understand." I did. My mother is a woman who has lived her life by recipes, tax tables, and the reliable geometry of morning light on a kitchen floor. She trusts things that can be added up. When the nurse left, Elise set the photograph down with care. "You met her," she said, as if tasting the sentence for truth. "All this time." "Not all this time," I said. Enough to know that her not knowing where I was didn't mean I didn't know where she was. Elise's chin trembled once, a small, involuntary rebellion against the doctrine she has practiced all her adult life, that the world is what you declare it to be. Mark put a hand over hers on the table. "It did not fix anything. It did not pretend to. I'm not asking you to forgive me," I said. "I'm asking you to stop building stories on top of blanks, and then believing the stories because they are yours." She looked as if she might argue on principle, then let that part of herself sit down. A tap at the door. Rowan, efficient as ever, stepped half in. "Car is downstairs," she said. Judge's clerk texted again, "Chambers in 25. She hesitated, then added in a voice that took its edges off for once. "Your mother's on the whiteboard for OR 2. I saw it on the way past. Looks like Dr. Yee kept a slot open." "Thank you," I said. Rowan's gaze flicked to the photograph on the table, to Elise's face, to mine. She didn't ask questions. She has learned that the right silence can be a credential. "I'll be 2 minutes," I told her. She nodded and withdrew. I turned back to Elise and Mark. "When they take her down, go with her to the double doors," I said. "Stop there. Don't let anyone walk you past the line unless a scrub nurse you recognize by name asks. If someone says they're from my office, they can tell you my middle name and the name of my first trial judge. If they can't call the number on this card and put the phone on speaker." I wrote the number on the back of my card and slid it across. It was not theater. It was the smallest habit scaled down for a hospital. Mark took the card like a person takes a map in a city they didn't mean to visit. "What is your middle name?" he asked, attempting an ordinary tone and almost getting it right. "June," I said. "Judge Kellerman." He nodded, storing the facts the way he stores recipes in weekend projects. Elise's voice found me again. She stopped. "I don't know what to do with all of this." "You don't have to do anything with it," I said. "Just stop doing the thing you've been doing." She gave a small sound that wasn't a laugh and wasn't a sob. "You make everything sound like instructions." "It's how I keep things from breaking," I said, and stood. We left the conference room together. The corridor swallowed us into its neutral geometry arrow decals on the floor wall art chosen by a committee that feared color. Outside the pre-op bay, a transport tech with a ponytail pushed a gurney past, humming under his breath, a tune that had not asked anyone's permission to be cheerful. On the far wall, a whiteboard listed last names in dry erase blue. Ellison, OR 2, 1410. Elise looked at the blue marker letters, as if they were the first legible thing she'd seen all day. "She hates cold rooms," she said. "We used to warm her hands on the radiator when we came in from the yard." She asked for a scarf, I said. Elise nodded. The blue one she echoed softly already, halfway back in time, rummaging in a bag that wasn't yet in her hands. At the elevators, Rowan waited a human metronome, counting down a separate urgency. I pressed the call button and felt the tactile click sink into my finger. Behind us, a monitor chimed somewhere, then stopped its small alarm, satisfied by an unseen correction. "I'll call from Chambers if I can," I said to Elise. "If not, Cal will." "You don't have to explain duty to me," she said quickly, and the word sounded strange in her mouth, like trying on a coat that isn't your cut, and finding it warm anyway. She looked at me, and didn't look away. "Bring the right words into that room." "I always try," I said. The elevator arrived with a sigh. The doors opened on our reflections, 3 people aligned by necessity, not history. Rowan stepped in, I followed. Elise stayed where she was, holding the photograph and the card, and the new physics of her afternoon. Mark moved to stand beside her, not touching, not touching. As the doors began to close, Elise spoke not loudly, not for the hallway, but in a voice she hadn't used with me since we were both shorter than the counter in our mother's kitchen. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" The doors sealed the word in the quiet of the car. Rowan hit the button for the lobby. The elevator descended a smooth box, lowering through a building full of other stories that had no interest in ours. I watched the numbers light one by one and let the breath in my chest choose a pace it could keep. When we reached the ground floor, the doors opened to a lobby of sliding glass and potted trees and people whose emergencies were different. Rowan moved ahead, carving a path through the eddies of traffic. Outside, the afternoon laid itself across the street like a neutral cloth. I stepped into it. Rowan set a clipped pace across the sidewalk and I matched it. The courthouse doors breathed us in. Security waved us through on sight. Cal was waiting outside chambers with a binder whose tabs read like a genealogy of our case proffers, chain of custody logs, intercept affidavits, suppression oppositions, a timeline too plain to be theatrical. "Hale's in a mood," Cal said. "Defense is running the absent general routine." "I'll be present," I said. Inside chambers felt like an old book leather dust, the precise quiet of a room that expects sentences to land correctly. Judge Hale glanced up from a thin stack of paper. Defense counsel already had his posture set half injured, half triumphant. Ms. Ellison, the judge, said, neutral as a scale. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "Your Honor," I said. Counsel began the way they always begin when the facts don't lend them oxygen. "We have grave concerns," he intoned, about coercive tactics during the June proffer, undisclosed Brady material, and a pattern of absentee supervision by the district attorney that calls the integrity of the entire prosecution into question. Rowan passed me the binder without looking like she had. My finger found the tab before the sentence finished landing. "On coercion," I said, "Exhibit F, the proffer transcript. Page 13, defense witness confirms counsel's presence and voluntary participation." On Brady, Exhibit M, disclosure log with timestamps matching the clerk's file. On supervision, Exhibit A, my signatures on the intercept applications, the charging memos, and the approval page you're holding. Defense tried to pivot, but the optics of a district attorney who delegates. "Optics don't testify," I said. "Records do." Judge Hale turned a page, read for a long breath. "Counsel, where is the evidence of misconduct?" There was a small fatal pause. "We believe." I asked what you have, the judge said, and the room's oxygen redistributed. He flipped to the transcript, skimmed, and set the pages down with the care of a man who knows paper can bruise. "Motion denied," he said at last. "No showing of coercion, no Brady violation, no ground to question authority." Chambers adjourned. Defense counsel's mouth made a promise his case couldn't keep. He gathered his papers and, left by the wrong door, realized it and detoured. Small humiliation, unspectacular and complete. "Thank you, Ms. Ellison," the judge said, already moving to the next item in his day. Outside, the hall's air felt less curated. Cal's smile was a line, not a curve. "Clean," he said. "It needed to be," I replied. Rowan checked her phone and tilted it so I could see a message from Agent Desai Harbor arrestees processed. Liaison looped. Beneath it, a second alert pulsed up from a different channel. Northside OR2. I opened it. Valve repair completed. Stable. PSU. Asking for daughter. Re. The heat behind my ribs finally had somewhere to go. "She's through," I said. Rowan nodded once, a small salute to a variable reduced. Cars out front. We moved in reverse lobby light, sliding doors, the city conducting its private symphony of horns and small refusals. The drive back to Northside lasted as long as every red light required, and no longer. In the elevator, up the mirrored walls, cut us into fragments and reassembled us floor by floor. On 3, the family lounge smelled like microwave noodles and old magazines. Elise stood when she saw me, a motion that had the awkwardness of a person standing for the wrong anthem. Mark beside her looked tired, the way furniture looks tired solid, still bearing weight. "Well?" Elise asked, and the attempt at neutrality frayed on the last letter. "Out of surgery," I said. "Stable. Recovery unit." Elise let out a breath that might have been a sound. She folded her arms, then unfolded them as if remembering she didn't have to perform control for anyone in particular. "We brought the scarf," she said. The blue fabric was looped over the back of a chair, its color too honest for the room. A nurse at the desk looked up when I approached. "Badge S. Jamil again." "Ms. Ellison," she said, recognition warming her tone. "She's in PACU 2. Still sleepy, but responsive." We followed her down a corridor of curtains and blinking monitors. In Bay 2, My mother lay small inside the machinery of recovery. Her hair looked like itself even under the cap. Someone had tucked the blue scarf over the blanket near her hands, a stripe of sky on a sterile bed, Mom Elise said, and even that single syllable sounded like a complicated chord. My mother's eyelids fluttered. She turned toward the voice and opened her eyes to a narrow fog slit. She saw Elise first, then me. Her mouth moved. No heroics, a slow calibration of lips and breath. Jamil leaned in. "Keep it light," she murmured. "She's still under the edges. Garden channel later." My mother whispered air more than sound. "We'll find it," I said. Her gaze came to rest on me like recognition settling into a familiar chair. "Numbers good?" she asked. "Good," I said. "You're through." She shut her eyes, the kind of closure that marks relief rather than retreat. A beat later, she opened them again, took a shallower breath, and found my hand with fingers that felt like a question. "DeMarco," she asked, barely there, and Jamil, who had seen enough family languages to let them speak, pretended to adjust a line and did not interrupt. "Guilty," I said. The smallest smile traveled the edge of my mother's mouth and took its time arriving. "My girl," she whispered. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't ceremony. It was a classification where to put a day that contained both a courtroom and an operating room, both a signature and a pulse. Elise stood on the other side of the bed and watched our mother's hand on mine, as if the sight had been contraband and she was finally allowed to have it. She touched the blue scarf with 2 fingers, smoothing a wrinkle that didn't exist. "The cap is ridiculous," she said softly to no one, to everyone. "She'll hate the photos." "No photos," I said, and Elise nodded, grateful for a rule she could follow. Jamil checked the monitor, noted something on a clipboard, and stepped back. "We'll move her to a room soon," she said. 2 visitors at a time." Mark took that cue and retreated to the threshold, hands in pockets, a man managing his own noise. Elise stayed where she was, not asking permission, not granting it, simply occupying a place that had always been hers and had felt briefly on loan. My mother's eyes were closed again, not asleep, so much as resting under a blanket of drugs that define pain downward. Her fingers flexed. I let mine answer. The monitor made its calm, petty beeps. The blue scarf warmed the white. Elise breathed out. "I was wrong," she said, her voice tuned for the space between us, not for a gallery. "About you. About the story I wrote without data." "I don't need an affidavit," I said. "I needed to say it," she replied. "To you, not to the room." We stood in the low-lit stillness and learned its grammar together. After a while, Jamil returned with a transport tech and a wheelchair like a punctuation mark. "Room is ready," she said. "We'll take her up in 5. Elise looked to me. "Not for permission, old habits die harder than that, but for alignment." I nodded. She nodded back the smallest treaty. On the way out of PACU, my phone hummed again. Cal Hale's order docketed. Media already spinning. We're covered. Then, Agent Desai Harbor defendants arraigned. Nice work. I silenced the screen and slid the phone away. There are rooms where even good news is too loud. We walked back into the corridor. Through a window, a strip of afternoon sky had found its way between buildings the same blue as the scarf, as if color had chosen to be consistent for once. Mark stood at the end of the hall, making a call in a voice he was trying to keep even. He saw us and pocketed the phone without finishing the sentence. They took my mother past us toward the elevators, a procession without drama. Elise walked with a gurney to the double doors, stopped where the line on the floor said stop, and didn't try to go farther. She rested her hand on the metal rail and kept it there until the doors closed. In the lobby, the volunteer at the information desk offered me a visitor's sticker I didn't need, and I took it anyway. It curled at the edges like something alive. "Rowan texted car still outside if you want it." I typed back, "Not yet." I stood for a moment in the mild institutional light and listened to the hospital's music, the wheels, the soft shoes, the plastic sigh of curtains. The day had rearranged itself without asking permission. Elise and Mark came to stand beside me, not touching, not apart. "Room number?" Elise asked. "Soon," I said. "They'll tell us." We waited. When the elevator bell rang and the doors opened on an empty car, none of us moved to fill it. We let it close again. Above us, somewhere in the working floors of the building, a monitor kept time for a woman who had taught me to count to measure, to prefer the comfort of numbers that match. I felt the press of her fingers again, the light demand of them, and understood that the weight I carried had shifted. Not gone, not lighter even, different. Balanced the way a scale is when its dishes stop arguing. "Come on," I said at last, and the three of us turned toward the elevators and went. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.